Hello, this is Ms. Roberts. I am recording chapters 13 and 14, the growth and development ages and stages modules. And I'm going to start with chapter 13, caring for the developing child. This is on page 429 in your book. Let's go to page 4. Let's go to page 430. So this just introduces like what influences growth and development, the sequential patterns, anticipatory guidance. So some winks and lollipops. Once a family member have identified their developmental goals for their child, age-appropriate toys, stimulation, play, nutrition, and sleep should be provided to facilitate normal growth. Sleep is important, okay? Sleep for normal growth is very important. The need for sleep will increase during the periods of growth. So why do teenagers sleep all the time? Because they're going through growth spurts, okay? They're not being lazy. Their bodies are just growing, and it requires more rest for them, okay? There's some optimizing outcomes, just understanding the growth and development. Make sure you read through this. Brazelton, researcher, has kind of mapped this out, so just make sure you read through that, okay? There's something called a paradigm shift, and this is laid out here from this to this. Just read through that. And then there's some touch point examples, ages birth to 3 years. So this chapter, I think, is broken down into the different milestones of each age. So we'll go through each one of those. It's important to remember, wink and lollipop, about the 9-month-old, okay? 9-month-old increases independence, crawling, cruising, makes the infant more dependent as separation anxiety takes hold. So separation anxiety is huge for a 9-month-old. Wink and lollipop. Again, separation anxiety is huge for a 9-month-old. Okay? And then we start talking about Freud, the psychosexual things. This is on page 432 over here as well. Freud was very weird, to say less. He had very almost sexual stages laid out: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stage from birth to 18 years old. You can read through those. But my favorite is Erickson. Erik Erikson, he's very contemporary. His makes sense, and I remember this from 23 years ago when I was in nursing school. So please make sure you understand these. You need to memorize these. I'm going to have a handout for you on these that I'll give you in class. But trust versus mistrust, that's birth to a year. Autonomy versus shame and doubt, that's 1 to 3. Initiative versus guilt, 3 to 6. Industry versus inferiority, 6 to 12. And identity versus role confusion, ages 12 to 18. Okay, very important for you to know those. To say something more about the identity versus role confusion, of course, this is teenagers, okay? So staring in a mirror is not uncommon for teenagers. They love to look at themselves, to do all the skincare for girls and makeup, and boys with the haircuts, and may start shaving, so it's not uncommon for them to stare in the mirror. Some more developmental theories over here. Piaget is mentioned. He has 4 stages. And then we have on page 437 we have our summary of theorists, and this is here. Okay, so let's go to that one. Some more different theorists here, but it lays it out in this chart. Okay, same chart over here. So just be familiar with these. Remember that Freud is psychosexual. Erikson is those psychosocial stages. Piaget is another one. and Kohlberg. Bronfenberger is one, these are learning domains. So, but Erickson is very important for you to know. This is the handout that I will be giving you in class. The one that you need to know, 0 to 18 years old, okay? The identity versus role confusion. I know it says 21 because that's how he set up his stages, but in this course, we only study up to 18 years old for pediatrics, okay? On page 438, let's talk about the different reflexes. And if you'll remember in your yellow folder, in your yellow clinical folder, I gave you a sheet on newborn reflexes. You need to pull that out because you need to know those reflexes for this exam, okay? It's in red ink, I think, on the back of an assessment for a newborn, so make sure you know those. So let's look on page 438 at these bullet points, okay? So the Moro reflex, all right, this is when they have the sudden jarring that causes the C with their hands forming. They kind of just, it's like a startle reflex. So the Moro is that startle reflex, okay? Rooting, sucking, grasping. Babinski is where the toes fan out. Remember, when the sole is stroked, if they fan in, curl down, then something may be wrong neurologically, okay? This Moro reflex, you need to know, disappears, wink and lollipop, at about 3 to 4 months, okay? It disappears, Moro reflex disappears at 3 to 4 months of age. There's some more on the milestones. Let's look at the infant one, okay? So infants are 1 to 2 months right here in this section. Really important, another wink and lollipop. They are, when they are prone, they should be able to slightly lift their head off of the floor, okay? Let's look at 3 to 6 months. 3 to 6 months is when they start sitting tripod, okay? Another wink and lollipop. So they're sitting tripod, the back is straight. No, I don't want all that. Just a second. Well, that shouldn't be highlighted, only this part. So sitting tripod, the back is straight and balances the head well. They should be able to sit alone at 8 months, okay? So 3 to 6 months, they can have that tripod where they're kind of leaning over and balance their head, okay? And then 9 to 12 months. 9 to 12, they should be standing, holding on to furniture, and cruising, so crawling, okay? These are all wink and lollipops, you know, where I highlight, okay? Another thing for 9 to 12 is they start playing peekaboo, another wink and lollipop. They start playing peekaboo, and this is the object permanence, okay? This is a 3-month-old where they're starting, you know, as we talked about up here, they're prone, lifting their head off the floor. This says 3 months, but they can hold their head still, raise it, rolling over, okay? And then this is the charts as well. Then we have the newborn milestones. We talked about the startle reflex. When does it disappear? 3 to 4 months, okay? And then some more over here, self-soothing, vision, tummy time. So tummy time, we never, ever, ever put our babies to sleep on their stomachs, okay? That can cause the sudden infant death syndrome, so that's a no-no. Always back to sleep, okay? So this is what I was talking about, the object permanence. So let's look at that. On page 440 and 441, we're talking about physical development and object permanence. Okay, so Growth is rapid. Another week in lollipop here on page 440. Their weight will double at 6 months and triple at 1 year. You need to know those numbers. Do not forget that. Those are board questions. Okay, when does the birth weight double? At 6 months. When does the birth weight triple? At 1 year. Okay, 12 months. Do not forget that. Put that way back in your brain and don't forget it, because you're going to need to know that forever and ever. Okay. And then we start talking about the object permanents over here. All right, so let's look on page 441 here. Object permanence is when the infant knows that there's an object there, even if it's covered up. Okay, so this baby sees the penguin under the red blanket. Okay, he knows it's there, even if it's covered up. He's going to try to go get the penguin because he remembers that penguin's under that blanket. This is why babies like peekaboo. Okay, they like, and remember what age I told you that kind of starts? 9 to 12 months, right? So it's funny to them. They laugh and have a good time whenever siblings or parents or whoever plays peekaboo with them, because they know that their eyes are behind there. They can't see them, then they uncover them. That they start realizing that object permanence from 9 to 12 months. Okay? There's another, let's see, here. Another week in lollipop right there. So just make sure that you understand the object permanence. Okay, they're looking for a toy or looking for somebody for something. On page 442, it starts talking about anticipatory guidance for infants. Make sure you read through these and understand those. Now we're going on to toddler. Toddler is 1 to 3 years old. Okay, so infant is 0 to 12 months. Toddler is 1 to 3. All right. Some psychosocial development for toddlerhood. Okay, another week in lollipop. They want to do it themselves. Okay, myself, mine. This is part of that autonomy, which is, wanting to be independent versus shame and doubt. Okay. Negative behaviors are characterized by that need for autonomy. So when you have the terrible twos, they're in this stage. Okay, they want to do things on their own. They want to master it. Okay, let's look at this chart. And it's the same thing here. So some fine motor skills for 1 to 3 year olds. Important week in lollipop. They start building blocks. Okay, 3 to 4 cubes, eventually 7 to 8 cubes, but the large blocks. Okay, so about 12 or so months, they'll start playing with those large building blocks. Okay, another important thing, week in lollipop, is the psychosocial play. This is called parallel play. Okay, this is when another child is playing with a toy and another one is sitting beside them. So like one child may be playing with a car, they're running on the carpet, and then the next child may be playing with a baby doll. This parallel, they're just sitting down beside each other playing with 2 separate different toys. And that's called parallel play, wink and lollipop. Make sure you understand that. Didn't highlight. Let me go back. Okay. Another thing to add here, if you want to write it in your book or take notes, the push and pull toys. Okay, so you've seen the little mini play grocery carts or vacuum cleaners or grocery store buggies. Those are the push and pull toys. Or the little ducks with the flappy feet. They start using these in this the toddler years. Okay. And then temper tantrums. Temper tantrums are a way to seek attention, of course, right? It's a normal way of working things out internally for that toddler. Okay? This is normal. They're not something, don't think something's wrong. This is normal for a toddler to have a temper tantrum, okay? So temper tantrums equal an attempt to gain control of a situation, if you want to make a note of that. Tantrums equal attempt to gain control of a situation, all right? Tantrums should be avoided to minimize confusion or anything with that child if that's possible. Most of the time it's not. As a mother of three, they're going to happen. So the goal for the child, though, is to be safe without any negative or positive reinforcement. So, it's not safe to threaten a child for having a temper tantrum. What we need to do is ignore the temper tantrum. If you want to make a note of this, wink and lollipop. What should you do? Ignore the temper tantrum. Don't give in to them seeking attention for it, okay? If they throw something or scream, ignore them. Because if they don't get positive or negative reinforcement for anything, they're usually not going to repeat it, okay? So we just have to learn to teach parents to ignore those temper tantrums, okay? Then we have anticipatory guidance for toddlers, and this is on page 445. Okay, same thing over here. So make sure you understand that. A big thing to understand in this box is sunscreen. We need to be putting sunscreen on our children. Okay, teaching the parents to protect their children. Long sleeve swim shirts, hats, and sunscreen. And again, the push and pull toys are listed here as well. Okay, very important. Push and pull toys for the toddlers. Okay. All right, so now let's move on to preschoolers. There's a case study here. Make sure you always do those case studies, right? All right. So, preschoolers start here on page 445. 446 has a table 13.7, which is listed over here. Let's talk a little bit about this. Another case study. Of course, make sure you do that. But physical growth. Gross motor skills, fine motor skills, cognitive, sensory, and language, and psychosocial. Important gross motor skill for you to know is that they start walking down steps with alternate feet. Okay, they jump from that bottom step. They're not just taking one step at a time. These are 3 to 6 year olds, so they can take one step, alternate feet, take the other step. Okay. About 3 years old, they do still place both feet on each step and hold on to the railing. You might want to make note of that. But after 3 years old is when they start alternating feet and jumping down from that bottom step. So at 3 years old, they're still placing both feet and holding on to the railing. Of course, make sure you do that case study. Patient education is on page 448. So let's look at this, and then we're going to start talking about school-age children. Okay. Oh, that is part of school-age children. Okay, so 447 starts with school-age children. Some anticipatory guidance are listed there for preschoolers. They kind of got these mixed up in here, but don't get confused. If it says preschoolers, it's talking about what? 3 to 6. Okay, so school-age children is here. Some anticipatory guidance. And then our developmental milestones. All right. So plenty of sleep and rest, of course. Let's look at this patient education. Remember, we just talked about it's essential for them to get the rest for growth. All right. So Wink and Lollipop, this section. It's essential for brain development in young children to facilitate the growth, healing, and learning. And if you don't know, the frontal cortex of the brain is not completely developed until about 25 years old. So that's why it's hard to have some young adults to make decisions, because their brain's still not developed. But for this teenage years, that's when it really starts making a difference. They go through that tremendous growth spurt. Hormones are changing, shoe sizes, everything is growing, okay? So make sure that you're communicating with your parents. You know that your child's not lazy. They're just growing, and it takes a lot of rest for that growth to occur, okay? It's important to provide consistent nighttime routine for these children, okay? So 6 to 12 years old, and then even 12 to 18, that growth and that rest, okay? So Wink and Lollipop, here we go. Rituals is what I have written out beside this, okay? So do they have a nightlight? Do they have a favorite teddy bear? Whatever they have, you know, that ritual, that consistency of bedtime, you know, being in the bed at 8 o'clock, making sure that a consistent routine is kept, and that child will function better, okay? So come home from school, get a snack, you know, give them a 30-hour rest period, get on some homework, then they eat supper, then they get a bath, and then they go to bed. So everything lined out. Keeping them in a routine is better for their brain development, and better makes them just a better person in general, because they're used to routine. They're not confused. They don't get anxious. So it's a huge factor. Let's look at the essential information in this same chart. Another Wink and Lollipop, very important, is having a familiar environment. You know, does mom and daddy alternate reading bedtime stories? You know, if grandma lives in the house or they live with grandma, you know, what does she do? Does she give them a milk and cookie every night? So having that routine, whatever it is, okay? Because of their imagination and their immaturity, they frequently have thoughts about something that could be harmful, okay? So important Wink and Lollipop, okay? They believe monsters or creatures lurk in their rooms after the lights have turned off. So just having the parents reassure them that everything is safe, of course, makes them feel more comfortable, right? 449 has this table 13.8 for school-age children, our developmental milestones. Some more Wink and Lollipop. So they start sewing and handwriting. Like they'll learn to write in cursive, hopefully, learn how to sign their name, print their letters, any kind of arts and crafts, playing video games. So it's very important in this age. And it's talking about the sleep and rest over here, and then the same chart for 6 to 12. And then the school age, you know, that talks about fine motor skills, the gross, and then the speech and language. So this is them drawing and coloring and learning how to write their letters and numbers, okay? It's very important in this school age, like 6 to 12. All right. let's talk about the adolescents. Your book says 12 to 19. We know it's, it's 12 to 19, 12 to 18, whatever you want to say. On page 450, so anticipatory guidance for school-age children, of course, is listed again after the adolescents. The book just, I guess, ran out of room or whatever, but one thing I do want to point out is this lead exposure. This is very important to know. Some students have told me that this is on your ATI PEDS Practice A about lead. So make sure you read through this and just kind of put this in the back of your head about what's going on with the lead exposure. Okay. Then 12 to 18 developmental milestones here. Just make sure you read through those. On page 451, the weight increases, their height increases. They start learning to drive, do team sports, even dating. So a lot of things are going through their head. What to say? So let's look at this. Helping them make good decisions. So of course, when you walk in the room, make sure that you introduce yourself. They start getting the attitudes and who is she to come in here and start telling me what to do? Get on their level, sit down. If they're sitting down, you sit down beside them, okay, where you're equal heights, because they need to learn how to trust you, okay. And let's go back and look, what stage are we in for Erickson? It's not trust versus mistrust, but it's what? Identity versus role confusion. So they're trying to figure out who they are, okay? Who are they? Middle school is a really, really odd stage for everybody, right? But once they get past middle school, who are their friends, their little cliques at school. Some of them go through being bullied or being the bully themselves. They're trying to figure out who they are. Are they cool? Are they whatever? But trying to figure out, even thinking about careers and what sports they want to do. So it's just a really crucial time, the adolescent period. So right before, let's look right here, the anticipatory guidance. We need to have parents understand they have to have an open line of communication. It's very important for those teenagers to trust them, okay? They have to have a trusted adult whom they can talk to about sensitive issues. And I'll tell you a story from when I worked in the ER about a teenager calling up there, but calling to the ER to ask some very sensitive information. And you have an open mind, because they may not have anybody at home they can talk to. So when they come in the office or the clinic, you need to make them feel as safe as possible. Some anticipatory guidance for adolescents. Make sure you read through those. And of course, we'll talk about vaccines and all that in class. All right, that is it for chapter 13.